Hello and welcome to Wednesday Interlude, in which I discuss my top 10 favourite biographies. The 10 biographies I have chosen are from a variety of subjects, covering various fields such as theatre, politics, science, history and literature that I especially value and admire. As in novels, the three things in common that I admire in my favourite biographies are that they all have fascinating characters at the heart of their biographies, tell their stories in a compelling way, and have a pleasing narrative style. I suppose I have read hundreds of biographies in my lifetime, and let me assure you that many, if not most, have fallen short in one respect or another. Many is the biography I picked up with mounting excitement at the prospect of reading about the fascinating subject of the book, only to be disappointed by the clumsy, ineffectual way the author presents his material, or the dry, academic, boring style adopted. The 10 biographies I am about to share with you are superior of their kind, and will reward the reader with an intellectually enjoyable and emotionally satisfying experience. I'm not going to rank these biographies, as they are all excellent in their own unique way, so I will present them alphabetically by subject. The first biography is The Life of Hans Christian Andersen by Signe Toksvig. Toksvig is a biographer of the very best sort. She tells a powerful story of a frustrated genius who finally triumphs in a narrative-driven style in excellent and clear English to produce a biography which is a triumph of biographical art. The opening paragraph will give you an idea of the racy and engaging style which Toksvig employs to weave a fascinating spell about this extraordinary and fascinating person. Hans Christian Andersen liked to say that his career was a proof of the existence of a guiding providence. His mother was an illiterate washerwoman, his father was a poor cobbler, not very well balanced. His grandfather died insane. The family lived in one room in a small Danish town. They were nobody. They had nothing except this frail, awkward boy whom most people thought queer enough to be going the way of his grandfather. But within the boy's lifetime he saw his fairy tales translated into the world's languages, and his person decorated by several of the many orders then available. Dukes and duchesses, princes and princesses, kings and queens competed to honour him, while even fellow artists admitted his great gifts, not to say genius. Reading of Andersen's trajectory from a poor, insignificant member of an insignificant family to world renown is an inspiring and thrilling tale of one man's determination to make the most of his gifts against all the odds and to realise his dreams. The second biography is On the Edge of Paradise, A.C. Benson, the Diarist by David Newsome. This biography differs from the life of Andersen in that Benson was not a person of great historical significance, but was rather an interesting figure in himself. Benson was a novelist, an essayist and a diarist who had also been a master at Eton College and a fellow of Magdalen College, Cambridge. One of his books of essays was called From a College Window, which is comprised of 18 essays on various topics. I've underlined passages in every one of these fascinating essays. It is significant that the biography is subtitled The Diarist, and it is helpful to read the diary of Arthur C. Benson, edited by Percy Lubbock in tandem with the biography. Here is the opening paragraph of the introduction, The Man and His Diaries. It starts with two quotations. I want prejudices, preference, humanity, humour, malice, salinity, 100 little spices in my dish, he wrote in May 1903. I confess to feeling the most minute and detailed interest in the smallest matters connected with other people's lives and idiosyncrasies, he wrote in From a College Window. Newsome writes, the diaries of Arthur Christopher Benson comprise one of the most extensive and detailed private records of a man's thoughts and observations of his times that has ever been preserved. In all, they run to 180 volumes and provide, with the exception of 4 blank years during a period of mental breakdown, a continuous chronicle from the summer of 1897, when Arthur was 35 and a housemaster at Eton College, until his death as Master of Magdalen College, Cambridge, in June 1925 at the age of 63. The whole amounts to more than 4 million words. In his biography, Newsome provides a corrective to the subjective persona projected in the diary and to the avuncular character that narrates the essays. There were 2 sides to the personality of Benson, and Newsome reveals Benson as he was in his relationships with his peers and fellows. Benson himself admitted that he had 2 sides to his personality. He wrote that in his books he diffused a mild, kind, religious sort of atmosphere, while in real life I was brisk, profane, worldly, etc. My books represent my lonely thoughts and moods. In ordinary intercourse I am different, but the books are much more real than the talker. Newsome explores these 2 contradictory personalities in this fascinating biography and shows the conflicts in Benson's personality due to his failure to resolve the conflicts in his nature of being an observer in his relations with others. Others were objects for descriptive analysis rather than subjects for social intercourse. The 3rd biography is Kathryn the Queen by Mary M. Luke. Luke brings Kathryn of Aragon to life in a way that nobody else has. This biography isn't simply a retelling of history. Instead, it is a fascinating story of a woman who lived during turbulent times. Luke has made Kathryn come alive and made her totally believable. You feel for this queen who had everything yet wound up with nothing. This book tells how Kathryn thought and why she did what she did. You feel her love for Henry VIII and her bewilderment and sorrow and lack of understanding why he fell out of love with her. Above all, the author did not make this queen to a saint, but rather kept her a flesh and blood woman that wins your sympathy, even as you wished she would not do what you knew she was going to do. This biography of Kathryn of Aragon is more a romantic telling of her story than merely a retelling of events. The author makes it clear in her preface that places, dates and facts are correct as far as can be ascertained, but certain events have been telescoped into a smaller framework for proper narrative flow. In other words, this is not a dry as dust academic study, but an artistically imagined and vividly presented narrative that recreates Kathryn as a living person. There are doubtless academic and authoritative studies of Kathryn available, and I have read several of them. But if you want to experience what it was like to be Kathryn of Aragon, married to Henry VIII, then this thrilling biography delivers it in spades. This is a true, well-researched and factual biography, and not a romantic historical novel, but the author has used all the skills of a novelist to portray a flesh and blood person who comes alive on the page. The dialogue and inner thoughts are, of course, imaginary, but they flesh out the actual events and circumstances very well. If all you want is facts, then seek out the academic text, but if you want a thrilling and enjoyable and absorbing narrative, then Kathryn the Queen by Mary M. Luke is the one to read. The 4th biography is Churchill, His Life and Times by Malcolm Thomson. This one-volume life of Sir Winston Churchill of 475 pages covers every major period in Churchill's life. The book was produced in the year that Churchill died in 1965 as a special memorial and was printed by Odham's Books on quality art paper and was lavishly illustrated with photographs from every stage of Churchill's life and times. Literally hundreds of biographies of Churchill have been produced since his death, some as multi-volumes, and Churchill himself wrote multi-volumes of autobiography. But for an excellent overview of this great man in his many facets, then this one superb volume delivers that. The fifth biography is Firebrand, The Life of Dostoevsky by Henry Troyat. Troyat in Firebrand has produced an excellent analysis of Dostoevsky's novels and a vivid portrayal of his extraordinary sufferings. In spite of the fact that this biography is based on thorough research and every detail is factually authenticated, the extraordinary life told in these pages is absorbing and involving due to the brilliantly written narrative of the author. This is what Troyat wrote in the foreword. The lives of many famous men are less colourful than their works. Faced with these sedate careers, the biographer is tempted to become a novelist, to supplement, interpret and invent, more concerned with his own art than with the truth, with himself than with his hero, and instead of serving a great man, he uses him as a subject. But with Dostoevsky, it is easier to sin by understatement than by overstatement. His story is so rich in spectacular despair and miraculous joy that the temptation is not to fictionalize but to shade off. It is as though Dostoevsky had arranged his life in the style of his novels and made his own story the most captivating of them all. Its truth seems more fantastic than the most fantastic legend. The sixth biography is George Eliot, The Last Victorian by Kathryn Hughes. Like all the best biographers, Kathryn Hughes brings George Eliot to life in this superb biography. The breadth of her research is impressive and her writing style is clear and highly readable. I feel as if I really got to know and understand Marion Evans as a person and acquired a clear conception of the wellsprings of George Eliot's fiction. From the fascinating opening paragraphs in which Hughes compares and contrasts two female children born 6 months apart in 1819, Mary Ann Evans and Alexandrina Victoria, she weaves an involving story that captures the imagination and sweeps you along in this enthralling and informative biography. The seventh biography is Galileo's Daughter, a drama of science, faith and love by Dava Sobel. In this captivating and moving account of the relationship between the scientist Galileo and his daughter, the nun, Sister Maria Celeste, Sobel has painted a lovely portrait of a highly intelligent and sensitive young woman at the dawn of the Renaissance. Sobel's exploration of the tension between belief and scientific conviction make for a compelling story told in lucid prose. In reality, there is really no conflict between science and faith, but Galileo, in proving by his investigations that the Ptolemaic earth-centered model of the world did not accord with his findings, and that in fact they were in accord with Copernicus's sun-centered model of the world, he came into conflict with the Catholic hierarchy. That Galileo would embark on independent thinking or dare to promote the Copernicus model was deemed to be heretical. Already in 1600, the same year that Galileo's illegitimate daughter had been born, the Dominican friar Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake in Rome for insisting that the earth travelled around the sun instead of remaining motionless at the centre of the universe. Galileo received severe reprimand and warning from a pope and a cardinal inquisitor to refrain from forays into the supernal realm, which were matters best left to the holy fathers of the Church, he was told. Sobel has woven the factual investigations of Galileo and his conflicts with the Catholic Church, together with the lovely letters written by his daughter to Galileo, supporting him in his trials and conflicts. A wonderful, involving biography. The 8th biography is R.L.S., a study by Jenni Calder. In this biography of Robert Louis Stevenson, Jenni Calder sets out to explore the shaping factors of a life whose ambivalence produced such masterpieces as Treasure Island, Kidnapped and Weir of Hermiston. The breadth of research is impressive, but this is not a dry academic study. Instead, Jenni Calder has done what all the best biographers do, which is to absorb all the information and to tell a fluently written story that is as thrilling and absorbing as one of Stevenson's novels. Growing up in the second half of the 19th century, Stevenson rebelled against the restrictive morality of his parents' generation and found the Calvinism of his own city of Edinburgh both damaging and compelling. But he was never merely a rebel. Hampered by respiratory illnesses that kept him an invalid for long periods and often by personal difficulties, he struggled constantly to maintain his unconventional but highly scrupulous way of life. Stevenson was a prolific essayist, poet and novelist with a special feeling towards the land of his birth. Most of his life was a necessary exile in France, the United States and the South Pacific, far from his beloved Scotland, which was the inspiration for so much of his work. Jenni Calder, in this wonderful biography, has woven the strands of Stevenson's exciting and eventful life with his work to produce a biography that enriches our understanding of both. The 9th biography is William Makepeace Thackeray, Memoirs of a Victorian Gentleman by Margaret Forster. Regretting that Thackeray had not written an autobiography, Margaret Forster set about redressing this lack. After reading every word that Thackeray had ever written, she decided to let Thackeray speak for himself in this highly original and imaginative biography. The biography is written in the style of Thackeray himself, as if he were writing his memoirs. Margaret Forster captures Thackeray's voice perfectly. Gregarious, sociable, charming, Thackeray was also moody, lonely and incredibly touchy. In this account of himself, his hopes, fears and passions, as well as his actions, are revealed as never before. Thackeray was an accomplished illustrator, and this biography contains his illustrations throughout. A very entertaining and enjoyable biography. The 10th biography is Shakespeare by Another Name, The Life of Edward de Vere, Earl of Oxford, the Man Who Was Shakespeare, by Mark Andersen. The debate over the true author of Shakespeare's body of work, some of which was published under the name Shakespeare, began not long after the death of William Shakespeare, the obscure actor and entrepreneur from Stratford-upon-Avon, who was conventionally assumed to be the author. There were natural doubts that an uneducated son of a Glover, who never left England and apparently owned no books, could have produced some of the greatest works of Western literature. Early investigators into the mystery argued for such eminent figures as Christopher Marlowe or Francis Bacon as possible authors, but recent scholarship has turned to Edward de Vere, 17th Earl of Oxford, as the true Shakespeare. Shakespeare by Another Name is the first complete literary biography of Edward de Vere that tells the story of his action-packed life as student, soldier, courtier, lawyer, political intriguer, sophisticate, traveller, and above all, writer, finding in it the background material for all of Shakespeare's plays. Andersen brings to bear a wealth of new evidence, most notably de Vere's personal copy of the Bible, recently analysed to show the correlation between his underlinings and the biblical allusions in Shakespeare's work, and has employed it all to at last give a complete portrait and background to the man who was Shakespeare. Andersen demonstrates how De Vere's real life matches the characters and circumstances found in the plays attributed to Shakespeare. I have read 9 or 10 books on the question of the author of the works attributed to Shakespeare, and this biography is the culmination of all those studies. Andersen spent 10 years in exhaustive research to produce this definitive biography of the man who was Shakespeare. Even if you've never considered this question or know nothing about Edward de Vere, this biography is a splendid and thrilling story of this extraordinary man who was the most important earl in the court of Elizabeth I. I can thoroughly recommend any and all of these superb biographies.